The dinner table went quiet the moment my son-in-law put down his fork. I remember thinking it was odd the way he did it. Not a clatter, not an accident. He set it down deliberately, the way you set something down when you've already decided what comes next. The conversation had been light up until then. My daughter asking about the venue seating chart, his mother talking about flowers she'd seen at some shop in Oakville, and then he turned to me, not quite meeting my eyes, and said that his parents felt it would be better if I watched the ceremony from home, that they'd set up a live stream, that it would be easier for everyone. I sat very still. I smiled. That's what I do when something lands wrong. I smile and I wait and I let the room breathe while I figure out what I'm actually looking at. My daughter was looking at me from across the table. Then she looked at him. She didn't say anything right away either. But I know my daughter. I have known her for 34 years. I know what her silence means when she is deciding something, and I know what it means when she has already decided. That night, her silence had a different weight to it entirely. My name is not important, but this story is. I am 68 years old. I live in a house in Burlington, Ontario, that my husband and I bought in 1987. The year my daughter was born, and the year we opened the second location of what would eventually become 3 dry cleaning shops, a small alterations business, and a commercial laundry contract with 4 hotels in the Hamilton corridor. My husband passed 7 years ago. He left me the business and a lot of good sense, and I have tried to use both wisely. My daughter, I will call her by the name I have always used when I am proud of her, my girl. She took over operations when she was 29. She has her father's head for logistics and my stubbornness, which is saying something. My son-in-law, he had been in the picture for 2 years when this happened. He was handsome in the way that makes you want to trust someone, good manners when he was being watched, a warm laugh, always the first to offer to clear the table. His name was the kind of name you forget easily. His actions were not. He started changing the furniture. Not right away, not all at once. It began with a comment about the reading chair in the living room, that it blocked the natural flow of the room. Then the curtains in the dining area, which he said made the space feel heavy. My girl laughed it off the first time. Said he had opinions. I smiled and said nothing. But I watched. He worked in the business by then. My girl had brought him in 18 months earlier to help with the commercial accounts, the invoicing side. He had a background in operations management, which was useful. He was good at it, which made everything harder to question. When someone is genuinely good at the work, you don't want to seem ungrateful. You don't want to seem suspicious. You think, maybe I'm imagining things, but I have run a business for 31 years. I know the difference between someone who wants to help a company grow and someone who wants to grow inside a company until they own it. He started arriving at the commercial laundry facility before I did. That was fine. I'm not territorial about hours. But then he started changing the ship schedules without consulting me. Small things. Staggered breaks. Different rotation for the weekend cruise. When I asked about it, he said he'd mentioned it to my girl. When I asked her, she said she thought he'd told me. He was already creating a small gap between us, so routine that neither of us noticed it for months. His parents came for dinner in March, then again in April. By May they were coming nearly every second weekend, and each visit felt slightly more like an inspection than a social call. His mother would stand in the kitchen doorway and look at the appliances with an expression I can only describe as inventory. His father would ask questions about the business, not casual questions, but specific ones. How many hotel contracts? Whether the agreement was locked in or month to month. What the property situation was with the Burlington location? I answered what I answered. I deflected what I deflected. I kept smiling. My girl didn't see it then. She was in love. When you are in love with someone, their parents are just their parents, and their questions are just curiosity, And the way they look at your mother's kitchen is just admiring the space. I don't blame her for that. I was 29 once. I know how it works. The engagement happened in January of the following year, after they'd been together just over 2 years. He proposed at a restaurant in Mississauga, Italian place, which she loves, and she called me from the parking lot still in her coat, and she was crying the good kind of crying. I cried too. Whatever I had been watching, whatever had been quietly tightening in my chest, I let it loosen that night. I thought, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's going to be good to her. Maybe this is just what it looks like when someone wants to build a life. I started helping plan the wedding almost immediately. My girl wanted a June ceremony outdoors, something that felt like the farm property her father and I used to rent in Prince Edward County when she was small. We found a venue in Caledon. It was exactly right. The seating chart conversation was supposed to be about logistics. I have replayed that dinner many times, the way his fork went down, the way he turned, the way he said it. Not unkindly exactly, but with a certainty that was worse than cruelty. His parents, he said, had concerns. His parents felt that having my girl's mother at the ceremony would make things complicated, that there were family dynamics on their side he didn't want to manage on the wedding day, that the live stream was really a very good option these days. Some people preferred it. He said the word complicated 4 times. I counted. My girl's face changed. I watched it happen. Something moved behind her eyes, the way weather moves across a field, and then it was still. She said, "What do you mean complicated?" He said it was a long story, that his parents had their way of doing things, that she knew how they were, that it wasn't personal. She looked at him for a very long moment. Then she looked at me. Then she looked back at him. She said, "Who exactly told you to say this to my mother?" He started to explain. His father had felt. His mother had mentioned. It had come up at their last family dinner. He'd been meaning to bring it up. She said, "You've been meaning to bring it up." He said, "Yes." She said, "My mother helped build the company you work for. She signed your first paycheck. She is the reason we have a venue deposit and a wedding date and a dress that's already been altered. And you sat across from her at this table and told her she could watch her daughter get married through a screen." He said he understood it wasn't ideal. She said, "It's not about ideal." The table was very quiet. His mother started to say something. She'd been sitting there the whole time both of his parents had stayed for dinner that night, which I understand now was not accidental. And my girl raised one hand, not rudely, just firmly, and his mother stopped talking. My girl looked at him one more time. Then she stood up. She said, "I need you to leave tonight, and I need some time." He looked at her like she'd said something in another language. He said, "You're not serious." She said, "I am very serious. I think you should go to your parents' house tonight." His father started. His mother reached for her bag. There was a lot of movement that I watched from my chair, where I had not moved once since the fork went down. When everyone had gone out to the front hall, when coats were being put on and voices were being lowered and raised in turns, I sat with my hands folded on the table and I breathed. My girl came back to the table after they left. She sat down across from me, in the same chair where she had been sitting all night. She reached across and put her hand over mine. She said, "I'm sorry, Mum." I said, "You have nothing to be sorry for." She said, "I didn't see it." I said, "I know. You weren't supposed to." Neither was I for a long time. We sat there for a while. It was a Thursday night in October, and the maple in the backyard had gone the color it goes every year, the one her father loved. That deep red that's almost embarrassing in how beautiful it is. We could see it through the kitchen window. She called me the next morning. She'd been up most of the night, she said. Not crying, just thinking. Going back over things. She told me she'd been going over the invoicing files from the commercial accounts. that she'd found some changes in the authorization process she hadn't approved, that two of the hotel contract renewals had language in them she didn't recognize, an amendment clause that, if triggered, would allow a third-party operations manager to renegotiate terms independently of the primary business owner. She said, "Mom, someone drafted those changes 8 months ago." I already knew who had drafted them. She said, "I think I need to call the business lawyer." I said, "I think that's a very good idea." She had a meeting with the lawyer that afternoon. I came with her. The lawyer, a woman I've known for 12 years, sharp as anyone I've met, went through the contracts carefully. She said the clause was unusual but not illegal as written. She said it would need a second signature to be actionable, and that second signature had not yet been obtained. She said we were fortunate that my girl had noticed when she had. We were fortunate. He came back to the house 2 days later to collect his things. He was calmer than I expected, which told me he'd had time to think and had decided on a strategy. He said he wanted to talk, that things had gotten out of hand, that his parents had pushed him to handle the wedding invitation situation in a way he wasn't comfortable with, and that he regretted how it came out. My girl listened to everything he said. She is a careful listener. Better than me, I'll admit. She waited until he was finished, and then she said she'd had time to look through some things at the office. His face changed. She told him what she'd found. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She spoke to him the way her father used to speak in a negotiation. Level. Clear. No extra words. She said the contract amendments had his email address in the document metadata. She said she'd need him to return his keycard and his remote access credentials. She said his position with the company was terminated effective immediately, and that she'd be in touch through the lawyer regarding the terms of his separation package, which would not be generous, but which would be fair. He said she was making a mistake. She said, "I don't think I am." He said, "After everything I've done for this company," she said, "you can discuss what you've done for this company with my lawyer." He stood there for another moment. I was in the kitchen doorway. I hadn't meant to position myself there, it just happened, and he looked at me with an expression I had seen before on other people who had underestimated me. A kind of recalculating look, like he was running numbers that weren't adding up. He left without saying anything else. His parents came the following Saturday. They didn't call first. I heard later that they'd knocked and that my girl had answered, and that his mother had tried to come inside. My girl had stepped into the doorframe, just enough, and said she wasn't accepting visitors without an appointment. His father had said something about family and about respect. My girl had said she agreed entirely that respect was important and that she would expect them to call before coming again. They left. She told me this over the phone, and she laughed when she got to the part about the appointment. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh in 9 days. I laughed too. My girl has my stubbornness. I've always been proud of that. The wedding venue deposit was non-refundable, most of it. We lost some money there. The caterer was more flexible. They were good people, a family company out of Guelph, and they held the credit for 2 years in case she wanted to rebook. She didn't rebook with him. But 2 years later, she did rebook for a different reason, a different celebration. Not a wedding, the business's anniversary. 35 years since her father and I opened the first location on Plains Road. She surprised me with it, told me it was a client appreciation event, which I knew was partly true. When I walked in and saw the whole thing, the tables, the people, our staff, our hotel contacts, some friends we've had for decades, I understood what she had really put together. She gave a short speech. She talked about her father. She talked about what the business had taught her about how to read people, about patience, about the difference between someone who wants to grow with you and someone who wants to grow over you. She didn't name anyone. She didn't need to. At the end, she said, "The best thing this company ever had was a mother who knew how to sit still and watch." I cried in front of all those people, which I never do. I am not a public crier, but I cried. I think about that dinner sometimes, the fork going down, The quiet room, the word complicated 4 times, and I think about what I didn't do, which was stand up and make a scene. I think about what I did instead, which was sit still and smile and pay attention. People always think the smile means you don't mind. It doesn't mean that. It means you are watching. It means you are waiting for the thing that will tell you exactly what you're dealing with. He told me what I was dealing with the moment he put down that fork and opened his mouth. He just didn't realize that I already knew it. He didn't realize that the woman he was dismissing had spent 31 years building something from nothing, had outlasted a recession and a pandemic, and the death of her husband, and had raised a daughter who knew how to read a contract and how to stand in a doorway and hold her ground. He thought I was the soft part of the equation. He thought my girl would choose him over me because that's what he'd seen in other stories, other families. He miscalculated. That's the only word for it. He sat across from me in my daughter's house, in the house that exists because of the work my husband and I did, and he told me I could watch from a screen. And I sat there and I smiled and I thought, keep talking. And he did. And that was all I needed.